Hi, I'm Angie Hartley of the BritTrack at DragonCon, and I will be the moderator today for our panel for the 10th anniversary of Downton Abbey. We'll be talking about 10 years of Downton Abbey, the impact it's had on its audience, and we will close with talking about the movie that was released last year. I have here with me Mike Faber, that guy from Earth Station 1 podcast, Rita De La Torre, I'm sorry, Rita.
De La Torre.
De La Torre, creator of the fiction podcast Continuum Force. I have Kristen, who's a Downton and period drama blogger. I have Sarah Rose, who's a general geek and fan of Downton Abbey. And Jagi Lamlighter, who is an author, an editor, and a writing teacher. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
So, Downton Abbey, it's been around for 10 years, and it's pulled in a lot of different people, and it has so many different storylines. What initially pulled each of you into Downton Abbey in the first place? What got you watching it? Let's start with Mike.
Actually, truthfully, my wife. She was a big fan of Upstairs, Downstairs, and she had heard that Downton Abbey was coming, and we watched it on PBS when it was aired, like a lot of us did, and she didn't think I would like it, and I was hooked right from the very first episode. There was just something about it that caught my attention, the atmosphere, the history, and just the dynamic between the characters was just wonderful, and I was hooked from there, and now I can't get enough of it.
Awesome. What about you, Jagi?
Well, I'd heard a lot about it. I didn't watch it at first. I watched it well after most of it was out, I think. Everything but the last season, maybe. And I'd heard a lot about it from friends. I'm a big fan of Victorian England and Edwardian England. I wrote a book that I never finished publishing, that's in that period. It's a period I love. But what got me was I watched House of Green Knoll, which is one of my favorite children's books, was done by the same director and it had Maggie Smith in it. And it was so beautifully and charmingly done that I decided to try the show done by the same director. And I loved it. I just loved it. I got my husband watching it. We just both loved it. We liked the quality and the characters and the look, and they just... you guys know why.
How about you, Kristen?
So my friend recommended it to me after season 2 it aired on PBS, and so I caught up that summer basically, so I could follow all the spoilers from the UK with season 3. And what hooked me was first going into it, I knew that Maggie Smith was in it and they had all these upstairs people, but it was really that the downstairs people played such a major role in the show. And so getting that full ensemble with the dynamic of the two classes, along with all the great acting, the music, the cinematography, all those elements just made it spectacular. And it's also one of my favorite time periods. I really like the Edwardian period and World War I time period. So that hooked me in there too, along with all the characters, the romance, all that stuff.
And Rita?
Well, for me, I've always loved watching period films and period dramas, especially things that were influenced by Jane Austen. And that's where I got my love for period drama. And at the time I got into Downton Abbey, I think it was already 4 seasons in. And I pretty much started binge watching it. I had watched all 4 seasons, waiting for the 5th season to come out. And by that time, my husband was also starting to really get into period drama. So I decided to introduce him to Downton Abbey as well and got him hooked on it just as much as I was hooked into it.
Awesome. I think I'm the only one that started from the very beginning. How about Sarah Rose?
No, I started from the very beginning.
Oh,
too.
You did, Mike? I'm sorry. I thought you said
Yeah.
I've got you in.
It's okay.
I started watching from the very beginning. Honestly, what got me into it was I was a big Anna Green Gables fan, so I really liked Julian and his stories. So I just felt like it was natural for me to watch it. I'm also a big masterpiece theater person in general. So that was basically my story.
So, Sarah, are you also a Megan Follows fan?
I am. I met her at Dragon Con and I cried. I didn't intend to, but like happy tears cried. So yeah. No, big Megan fan.
I got a picture of her with my daughter as well. That was awesome. Big Anne Green Gables fan as well.
Yeah, I'm hoping she comes because my picture is like red, blotchy eyes and everything now because I was crying.
But hey, at least that's how they remember you then. Oh, you're the one. Got
You're
it.
the one who cried. Oh, childhood hero, you know.
So, back on topic. One of the greatest things about Downton is that it has multiple parallel plots going on, a lot of different storylines. What was your favorite storyline throughout Downton Abbey? This time, let's start with Rita.
Oh, where to start? I don't know if I could pick just one, but if it had to be one storyline, I mean, I love Mary Crawley, but for me, it's got to be oh my Lord, Thomas Barrow. He is the one character that you love to hate on the show.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess I'm one of those. I love all the different storylines. I love all of the characters, but I always felt his storyline to be I'm having a problem finding a word, but he was just so enigmatic.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
He was the character you love to hate, pretty much. And you actually ended up feeling sorry for him.
Yes, especially towards the end.
Yeah, and he had a great character arc. You know, I mean, he really changed and went places during the story more than some of the others.
Out of all of the characters, I think he was the one who probably had the most character development out of everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Oh, very much so, because you did see other characters evolve over the time of the series, but his character, he went from the sniveling, weasel type to having to go to World War I, and his way of getting out of the war was literally sticking his hand over the bunker and getting it shot and such. And he didn't change because of that. He changed because his having to deal with his sexuality and the sexuality of society's view on it, and it was really interesting how they handled it.
Also, I think he kind of like the Grinch in his heart growing, he kind of went from being a very selfish person to someone who became more aware of others and more caring about the others, even if he really didn't want to almost.
Yeah.
And they did a really good job in the movie. They gave him kind of his own plot.
Yeah.
Further continuing his character. And because, yes, we felt sorry for him at the end of the series. And he kind of, I don't know. I just felt like they humanized him more during the movie, too, which was
And they
great.
gave him a wonderful kind of an end where he was
Exactly.
going.
Yeah.
So no, exactly. And that was what was great about it, is they gave him an end that was plausible. It was realistic too.
Not the happily ever after kind of it.
Exactly.
He epitomized one of my favorite things about the show, which is it takes some very controversial ideas like his life or Tom being a socialist and some of the other things, and it dealt with each one of them really fairly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It didn't I never got the feeling I knew what the writers and directors' opinions were about anything. It was more like, this is life. some things are good, some things are bad. They have an up and a down, and I thought they did that really well. It wasn't a thing where you walked away thinking, hey, they're pushing this idea or they hate this idea. It was more like, this is what life was like at that time.
Well, exactly. And that was interesting because, he had O'Brien for the first couple seasons as like the two of them together.
Yeah.
It was like they wanted to almost feel like they wanted to take down the family with some kind of scandal or something. And it went as far as O'Brien literally leaving the soap on the floor and, Lady Grantham losing the baby because of it.
Yeah.
And everything. And I think that's where I think Tom and her divided pretty much.
And when she left, suddenly he wasn't the heavy and the villain anymore. He had to find a new role. And I think that's where he starts developing from being selfish to seeing himself as part of the household. Which takes a long time, but he does it eventually.
It's a great point. Great storyline. What about you, Kristen? What was your favorite storyline?
So my favorite characters is Anna and Bates, but those storylines got so sad. So it's hard for me to say like that was my favorite storylines or any of theirs in particular outside of them falling in love in the beginning of the show. But overall, I like a lot of the first two seasons plot lines where it was kind of showing you more of like life in the house in that time period and life during the war. And that kind of thing. Like in season 2, there's the part where William and Matthew are missing, and then they show up during where they're having that little like talent show sing along. And I like those kinds of moments. Like they're very heartwarming. So yeah, in terms of an actual like longer storyline, I'm not exactly sure. I like more of the episodic storylines that would be running like interwoven with the other plots that were going on. And I liked the house being like a convalescence hospital in season 2 as well during the war. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was interesting because you brought up, Bates and Anna, and it was interesting because it felt like every season, oh God, what's going to happen with them? Who's going to end up in jail? Who's going to be accused of murder? Or, poor Anna, when the season she got raped and everything.
Yeah.
And it was just horrible. But then when the movie came out, I was like, oh God, please don't let anything happen to them. And nothing happened to them. It was wonderful. It was awesome.
Yes.
It was. They earned it. And,
they did.
With soap opera is that sometimes you can't earn a happy ending, but here they did, and it was great. They got through they had horrible problems, and then they overcame them, and that was really satisfying.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, and that's what it was. They got the happy ending they finally deserved, and everything, and they got the baby, and and it was just awesome.
Truthfully, that's probably my favorite storyline.
Yeah.
I knew it. Well, you also do a great cosplay of Anna too, which is awesome.
Yeah, I do. I thought about wearing it, but
that would have been cute.
That would have been awesome.
Sorry, guys, didn't have enough time to put it on.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine. What about you, Mike?
Oh, for me, my wife Judy would be upset if I just didn't say it was the dog for the whole time. But for me, I just loved all the different dynamics because you did have a lot of different characters grow. They came in, they left, and then some came back again, and it was just awesome. But Maggie Smith's character, she was just awesome all the way through, from the very first episode all the way through the movie, because you knew the movie at the end you're not going to see her anymore. That was her bow out pretty much, and
yes and no.
I don't think you're going to, because they're going to be jumping I know they're doing a sequel, and her character is her character has to be in her upper 80s on the show from the time, they were saying. And she was always the one who was so resistant to the change because you saw, they got the first telephone, the first refrigerator, the radio. And it was just neat seeing how all these different things. And each time she was the one who was like, had the quip little answer. No, that's not proper, and she was living in the past and she was realizing it's now time to embrace the future and her time is done. And that's the way I felt with it. And that's what she confided in to Mary in the movie and everything. And it was just awesome. And the character that she, her play with, oh shoot, I have, what is her name? The one who was
Mrs.
the one who was Crawley. Yeah. Mrs. Crawley. It was just the banter between the two of them. They became best friends, and it was awesome.
Yes.
It was really, really well done.
I was really afraid they were going to kill her off in the movie, and I was so happy with the way the movie ended. I know you were.
That scene still makes me cry, though.
Yeah.
Oh, it's great. They didn't show it on the screen. I don't think they need to.
Yeah.
And everything. Because I thought the final season they were going to kill off Lord Grantham. There was, that one scene where he had the heart attack or at the table altar. And everything. It's like the altar. And it was so well done. It was like, oh, they're going to do something like that with Maggie Smith's character during the movie. But the way they handled it so classy. It was awesome. And it was a fitting farewell to a great character.
I absolutely agree.
That's awesome. What about you, Sarah Rose?
This is always a really hard question for me. Overall, I mean, the story that originally got me was Lady Mary, but I didn't like how she ended. So probably it'd be between that and Sybil. To be honest, though, it was such a sad ending, but you saw her character continue, with the story about baby Sybil and just that whole, like, she felt like a presence on the show even though she was gone. So I guess Sybil for me, I'm really into like the women's rights part of it and her speaking her mind, and also, nobody can forget her wearing pants. I mean, that was such a huge, it just shows the times. Women wearing pants was such a huge shock, so I guess I would say Sybil.
Before I saw Downton Abbey, one of my favorite movies is the more recent version of Winter's Tale, not the Shakespeare one, the other movie. And that same actress plays an unbelievably wonderful heroine in that story, even though she also dies sadly. So I just fell in love with, Lady Sybil right away when she came on stage.
That's awesome.
It was heartbreaking, because you forget how dangerous childbirth.
Yeah.
Even today it's dangerous, but back then it was just like, what happened to her. She seemed like she had a normal pregnancy, and then boom, it was just horrible. And it was just like, and I felt for Tom. It was just like, oh man, because this is a family that really didn't even really want him there. Yeah. He grew later as, they accepted him later as part of the family. They kind of had to, but because this was the ruffian, this is the chauffeur that Sybil brought into the family, and and then on top of it, he's a socialist, so and so, but it was just awesome, and you felt for Tom that whole episode. It was just like, oh, they can't do anything else, and then they kill Mary's husband. It's just like, oh, all right. Oh, spoilers if you haven't seen that episode yet.
Spoiler warning.
my answer to the question of
Perfect. That was
favorite. I am following right up because
Yeah.
it follows right. Is Tom. I really like the Bates. Bates are probably my first, but we've already talked about them. And the second is Tom because he makes such a huge change. One of the moments that really struck me, and it's just a little thing, but it struck me as how wonderfully accurate and amazing the show was where Tom doesn't believe that the Russians are going to kill the Russian royal family, and it's like, yeah, I guess if you lived at that time, it wasn't already done. You wouldn't know it was going to happen, and
Exactly.
so that was such an accurate feel for what life was like, So his whole story from chauffeur to husband to, trying to find his place, I think is one of the most delightful parts. I mean, all these things you mentioned, it's not like any of them are not good, but I really liked his character. I really liked his whole progress and trying to fit in and try to, find his old and his new life and all that together. I thought.
Oh, his arc that he had was just awesome. And, even, all the way through, deciding, that, yeah, he's a socialist, but he also believes in truth and justice. And you saw that in the movie. And it was just awesome. And I was glad to see, oh no, now it's going to be Tom involved in a murder mystery. Did he help, try to assassinate?
And it was great.
It was just awesome.
Yeah.
And everything.
And who would have thought he'd save the King of England,
Exactly.
Of all people.
Exactly.
Like Thomas, it shows such a great growth, the kind of growth that happens to people as they go from being young, concerned about themselves to part of a family, part of a household, part of a world, and they both in different ways had that wonderful kind of coming out of some of their early very dramatic ideas into things that were more balanced, more fair, but without in any way diminishing their character.
That's a great lead in to my next question. You guys are ruining my questions, by the way.
That's the best kind of panel, though. Come on, think about it.
So, my favorite character was Tom as well, and his storyline. And Tom and Thomas both grow tremendously and we've talked about that already. Other than those two, what other characters do you think had significant growth throughout Downton Abbey? And Jagi, why don't we start with you again? Yeah.
Well, I think the second sister in her is Edith, right?
Edith.
She had great growth. She really went through a lot, and some of it was almost never really came out. She was kind of suffered privately, but from just kind of being the one in the middle to being only one of two sisters and then falling in love and then, being killed by the proto-Nazis, the young man, and, trying to have her daughter. And, she had such a good idea with the farmer and her daughter, and it didn't work out for such a natural reason. So that whole thing, all right through how it ended, I thought she made great strides in her character.
I thought she went from being the jealous sister, and she was the one who let it leak about the gentleman dying in Mary's bed and everything.
Luke.
Yeah, exactly, which was awesome. That was such a great scene. To actually becoming a well-rounded character, becoming an editor and owner of a newspaper. And it was just, she grew completely through it.
Yeah.
And, having the child and having to give it away to hide it and everything. It was just awesome.
Well, and then to later bring her child back, to bring Marigold back. That was another.
And the whole family actually figuring it out.
The family,
Mm-hmm.
All on their own. It was amazing. What about you, Sarah Rose?
I guess I've already said I didn't like how she ended, but Mary did grow quite a bit in the series. I didn't like her husband at the end, so that's why I didn't like it. But Mary just Mary was kind of like the person you love to hate, the sister you love to hate at the beginning of the show.
Yeah.
And then towards the end, and then even going into the movie, like you saw her grow into such a leader and into such a just a passionate person who genuinely cared about people. And I do think that that was part of her at the beginning, but she wasn't afraid to show it. She took off the prim and proper mask and became more of her own person and more independent. And so I think Mary grew quite a bit in the series. So
It's interesting because you saw her literally take over the planning of the estate.
Mhm.
And she saved the family,
Mhm.
because it was Matthew and her originally doing it, and it was then Mary, after Matthew died, she was like, okay, I'll take over it. And it was just amazing, seeing her growth for that. But then the whole thing, I didn't really I agree with that, the relationship with her new husband and everything. And the whole thing with the race cars and everything. It's just like,
yeah.
I'm a Matthew
I
big
didn't like
fan.
this character.
I didn't dislike
I thought he
him,
was
but
kind of controlling, and yeah, I'm not going to complain about
I
it.
didn't dislike him, but I noticed when we went to see the movie, my husband couldn't remember who that guy was. Characters pretty well. So maybe
I
he
thought we were
was
going to get the whole movie without seeing him, and then he showed up right
Yeah,
at the end.
he only comes in that right at the end.
which was for
I'm
the best.
back. Dun, dun.
And Kristen, what are your thoughts?
Of a character who grew,
The most.
I think they all grew the most. Well, we've touched
Other-
upon, I think, a lot of the ones who did the most, but
Mhm.
I'm also thinking of Daisy downstairs, because she went from being
Yeah.
kind of like, oh, I'm just a little kitchen
Yeah.
maid and I have to listen to Mrs. Patmore and do whatever she says. But then as the show progresses, she becomes the assistant cook, and she then also betters herself by learning more math and all the things she didn't learn in school, and getting those lessons and having Mosley even tutor her and taking that test and everything. And with her, I liked it because it was showing that the servants could, they weren't stuck where they were necessarily. They could have more upward mobility, and they didn't have to necessarily be servants their whole lives. But
Oh my God!
Yeah.
In the movie, when Daisy was like, she was just like mouthing off to everybody,
Oh,
and,
yeah.
and it was just
main character. in the
And
movie.
her, I don't know why I bothered when she went to see the king in the parade, and just that whole who would have thought she would have ended that way from the way she began.
Mhm.
So
She became more of the socialist than Tom even did
Tom,
after
yeah.
that fight.
The movie.
Yes.
To me, she kind of picked up where Sybil left off.
yeah,
Mhm. Yeah. It's a good one.
Dude, I loved her relationship with the man who wasn't her. I guess he was her father-in-law, but from really quickly. Anyway, the older farmer. That
Yeah.
was
William's
Oh,
dad.
Yeah,
that
Mr.
was always
Mason.
wonderful. That was
Yeah.
so awesome.
Rita, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I'm going to throw this out there, but Carson, I think, grew a lot during the series as well. Maybe not as much as any of the other characters, but at the beginning, it was everything revolved. His life just completely revolved around the family, protecting them and serving them. And as the series progressed, he went from being that butler and being their servant to being more part of that family. And I think they treated him as being more part of that family. And he realized that he didn't protect them and serve them because it was his job. He did it because he loved them.
That's
And-
really well put. That's beautiful.
It is.
Yep.
And Mike?
That's tough because I was going to originally say Mosley because he grew a backbone
Oh, yeah.
during it, but
the
actually
curtsy
I'm gonna.
thing, though.
Oh gosh! Oh, when he met the king, when ended up meeting
Yeah,
the
yeah,
king
yeah.
in the movie.
And
Oh
at the dinner
god!
table.
Yeah. Oh god, that scene. But I'm actually going to say Lord Gratham. He had to learn to become accepting during this the whole through the series. He had to put up with so much. He had to, the person who was going to basically save the family was killed in the very first episode. He went down with the Titanic, and
That's right.
and then he had to, he was planning on, my daughter's husband is going to run the estate. It's going to be in good hands and everything. And now he's dead. He's gone. And so he had to pick up the pieces there. Then he had to pick up the pieces of him losing almost all their money because they invested in railroad. And then he almost, and it's just like thing after thing. Then he went to war. And then he had, and each time, and all these new technologies, the world was changing around him, and he had to go with the flow. I think he handled it very well, but when he was fighting against it, he had his wife, come on, you got to do this. This is for the girls. This is for, and that was what was wonderful about it. He cared enough about his family that he was willing to bend against tradition and to move across it, and he did throughout the rest of the series. And it was awesome when he figured out that the young lady who used to come up to the house because she used to be with the farmer, was basically his granddaughter. He was one of the first to figure that out.
Yeah.
And everything. So he's a smart cookie, but he also was a product of his generation and of his time. And he had to be able to adjust with it.
When I was talking earlier about how everything was presented without judgment, one of the things in our modern world we kind of take for granted that aristocracy is not that important. But this period was the period when it went from the old way to the new way. And he had all these duties that the aristocrat had. He had to try to negotiate being true to all that and adjusting to the modern world, and that was not an easy thing to do, really.
No, not at all. And it was interesting too because the family had to hide that Mary had a man die in her bed from the father. He didn't know for many seasons.
No.
And then when he finally found out, he was like, what?
But in one word, what did you guys think about the movie? And then explain yourselves. So one word, not 3 words, not 5, 1 word, and then explain yourself. Starting with Kristen.
Oh my god.
No pressure.
It's not. It's a word that has a hyphen in it.
That
I guess you could write it as one word. Okay, so here's my word, and this is going to be probably an unpopular opinion, but slapstick. It was very slapstick to me.
Really? Why is that?
Really?
Yes. Really? Okay. So I've seen the TV show many, many, many times. And when I saw the movie, it just seemed incredibly more goofy. So, as I said, it's an unpopular opinion, but it didn't quite have the same flavor to me. I felt like the TV show was very dramatic, but had, humorous moments in it, whereas the movie felt more like it was sillier with some scenes that were very dramatic. So, like, the movie, of course, we had, like, the thing with Mary and Violet, and Violet's like, I'm dying. But, like, the amount of, like, drama versus humor to me, did not seem the same. And I know it was, like, a 2-hour movie, but, like, comparatively to, like, one of the Christmas specials, it still seemed kind of not balanced the same way to me. So, and I think also the movie focused more on the plots than it did the characters outside of, like, mostly, I would say, Thomas. Like, Thomas got to have his whole, like, side plot where it's, like, him and meeting, Richard Ellis and all that stuff. Whereas the others were all kind of, like, more or less grouped. So, like, the servants had the servant plot and that kind of thing. So they were, like, trying to scheme against the other servants versus, like, hey, this is what they're all doing now. So, but yeah. I'm like the only person who loves the TV show who didn't really like the movie, so. Yeah.
You're the one, okay.
That's me. You found me.
What about you, Jagi?
I would say satisfying. And I didn't have the reaction at all that it, you know, I mean, because I guess for one thing, I don't expect movies to do what TV shows do, so I kind of give a different standard. But I really went in afraid they were going to try to shake something up, not just that they might kill somebody, but that they might do something out of step with the show. And I didn't feel they did that, and that made it really wonderful to me, you know. And I thought that they really manage an amazing amount of closure for amazing amount of characters. I mean, considering it was a short movie, yeah, you can't do as much as you can do in a season. But I thought with what they had to work with, that it was really satisfying. You walked out and you're like, that you know, they didn't mess up anything I loved. You know, to me that mattered a lot.
How about you, Rita?
If I had to pick one word, it would be episode, because that's what it felt like. To me, it just felt like watching another episode of Downton Abbey, but I don't see that as a bad thing. And for me, being able to go to the movie theaters and revisit that world, and like Jagi had said, there was a lot of closure for me watching the film. And even though some people might say, oh, you know, watching a movie that feels like another episode might not be a good thing, to me, I think it was. And my husband and I both enjoyed it for the same reason, because it did feel like it was just an additional episode to that last season. Think of it like an epilogue. Maybe I should have picked epilogue.
Awesome. What about you, Mike?
For me, I'm kind of agreeing with most of you, actually, even Kristen a little bit, that I liked, you know, that I liked it, but it was also, you know, it felt very episodic that this was another episode set 2 years after the last time you saw your favorite family. And, you know, things have changed, the kids have grown up, but you also had to be introducing this to a brand new audience, because it wasn't PBS that it was being shown on. It was being shown at a theater, a bigger audience. So they kind of had to introduce you to everybody all over again. And I liked how they did that. I thought it was really well done. Like, you know, Jagi said, it was very much closure on a lot of different storylines that had been started on the TV show. I'm a huge history buff, and that's, I think, one of the things that drew me to the show, then made me fall in love with it, is how true to a lot of history they kept. And I was hoping, you know, they would do this pre-1929, because in 29 was the Wall Street crash, but it also affected the rest of the world, and a lot of the aristocracies lost their homes and stuff. And I was hoping they weren't going to end with that, like, oh, they had to leave Downton Abbey or something because they lost all their money and such. But I'm glad they kept it in 1927, nice and neat, and I thought it was very interesting. There's a chance, I've heard, that in the next movie we're going to actually experience the crash. And so it's going to be interesting to see what Julian has for us. So, but I loved seeing everybody. I loved that, you know, Bates and Anna didn't go to jail again. Or I'm also glad, you know.
True. They did things that could get them in jail, but...
Yes, but that's a whole different story and everything. It was interesting because the one thing I found, though, is, you know, the whole last part of the last season of Downton Abbey, they started talking about Carson getting really sick and everything. And I felt like they really played that down in the movie and everything. And I was a little disappointed with that, because I would have wanted to see, you know, they needed Carson back because of his experience and everything. But he should have not been as able to do the stuff he was doing with the illness that he had and everything. So I found that kind of just, you know, like a little like nitpicky stuff, you know, but I loved everything else about it. And it was great. And, you know, it was even great because if we could talk in a minute or so, I want to talk about the Downton Abbey experience, if you guys have been able to go see that. So, do you mind me going into that at all?
Well, let's let Sarah Rose answer. and then we'll come back to
Okay.
that. I promise.
Okay.
Uh, I would say my one word would be satisfying. I agree pretty much with everybody, even Kristen. uh, I liked that was it wasn't overly dramatic, and it also, while it tied things up, it very much left things open. It didn't tie everything up into a nice little bow that, I guess I like when stories do that because it makes it feel like these are real people still, because nobody's ending uh, is that pretty, and stuff like that. Um, you know, the movie overall, I thought they did a very good job. I was hoping we would get to see the kids a little bit more.
Yes.
Give them some kind of character, but in the end, we pretty much saw them waving at Mary, and then all the adults going and seeing them when the king and queen were there, and they didn't have much of a story plot beyond that. I'm hoping that uh, in the next movie, and I don't know, has it been confirmed that there's going to be a second movie?
I believe
I
there
know
is.
that
Pretty
they
much.
said they were
Well,
talking about it.
It's pretty
Okay.
much a done deal.
They haven't actually released a press statement about it. It's more of just like, oh yeah, we're gonna look into it, blah blah blah. They haven't
Okay.
said
Julian's
anything in the
he's
last
already
couple
plotting
months,
it out.
So.
Nobody has about anything though over the last couple of months.
Yeah.
Hashtag 2020.
Thanks, 2020.
But yeah, no. Overall, I felt the story was very satisfying. It did feel like you were back at Downton Abbey, and it could be another episode in Downton Abbey, and that didn't bother me, because in the end, I want there to be more of this story, because it wasn't overly dramatic. It wasn't overly sad. Obviously, there were parts. Violet, as I said, I just actually rewatched the movie this morning to remind myself, because it's been a little bit. Violet makes me cry every time, but overall, I thought it was very satisfying.
And I wanna touch on one thing that Kristen said, and then we'll hand it off to Mike for the Downton Abbey experience after I touch on the one thing, and then yeah. So you were talking about all the different storylines, Kristen, and in the movie, and how different groups were grouped together. Do you feel like there were too many storylines, you guys, in the movie? Or do you think it was perfect the way it is? Do you think it distracted from the main plot line? We'll start with Sarah Rose. Yeah, on this one.
I didn't necessarily find it distracting. I did like what they did with Barrow, and how they gave him and his sexuality a more prominent role, and not. It wasn't sad, but it was realistic. Okay, with the nightclub and that whole scene. I found it a little odd how they separated him, since he was supposed to be the butler. I guess it sort of fits into his character that he just went off, and when Carson came back, off with a huff and being like, well, I'm not really the butler, and went off. But I guess that was my only one issue, was he just felt like such a separate part of that movie. But other than that, I thought they did a really good job of including everybody, and they did a good job of including the upstairs and the downstairs and stuff like that.
What about you, Jagi?
I have this opposite. I mean, not only do I think there should not have been less plot lines, because I wanted to see all my favorite characters, but I was still sad that there was no Mosley Baxter love story, which I wanted them to. I mean, they kind of was building on that, and then I wanted them to get together, and they didn't touch on that during the movie. I realize they did a lot, so I'm not going to be too angry about it. But I love that actress. She's in Worst Witch, where she plays like this extremely intimidating, powerful
Yes.
witch. It was a completely different character in every way, you know. And so that's a plot line that I had been interested in. They didn't get to, but I really was happy that they touched on all these things because it's like, you know, kind of it's like the movie is a love letter to the fans, and it's what we want to see, which is the people the story's been following. And if it had followed less of them, I would have missed it.
And you, Rita?
I think it was a good balance. I don't think there was too many or too little. I mean, I didn't have any issues following the plot lines or, you know, being distracted from one over another. So overall, I think everything flowed fairly well.
So, Mike, what did you think? Too many storylines? Not enough?
No, it definitely had plenty of storylines. I thought it was really well done, and I loved seeing a lot of the, you know, like we keep on saying, a lot of some of the storylines wrapped up. I did think maybe it was a little too much. I think if it was like an extra hour, I think it would have fit in better with everything. But overall, I was happy with how they did it and everything. So, you know, I'm glad they had time to focus on Thomas's story. Glad they had time to focus on Tom. They had time to focus, and it wasn't all the way through. And, you know, there was times I almost felt like in the movie that
can you guys
Tom
hear
and
me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So
Yes,
I can
we
hear
can.
Sarah Rose. I
Okay.
can only communicate with her right now. Okay, so I feel like there were too many storylines in the movie. Is the question?
Sorry.
So
That's okay.
I feel like there was a lot going on, but it was kind of all interrelated to the same plots. So you had like there was like the king and queen servant, the royal servants were there, and they were doing all their little stuff, and so there were all these parts that went in with those plots, like the lady's maid who was stealing things and like that kind of thing. But I feel like they weren't like large overall arcing plots. They were just like parts of a major plot, as opposed to like in the TV show where the plots were a little bit more character driven. So it'd be like, this is, say, like Carson's doing this episode, this is what, you know, Mrs. Patmore is doing, whereas upstairs Mary's doing something. So it was more like they were all kind of together.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. Thank you.
No.
Mike.
I can't.
No,
but hi.
Okay. No, it was
so weird.
it was good, and you know there was just it was just neat to see our families come together and everyone be put, like a little bow on everything to finish everything up. So it was pretty cool.
Awesome.
That
Do you
was
want to do you want to talk about the Downton Abbey experience?
Sure, I'd be glad to. I know Rita's also been there also, and up in Asheville at Biltmore Estate, they had for probably the last almost year now. They have what they call is the Downton Abbey experience, which is an interactive experience that you can actually hear the stories of each character. You could hear what was happening in history at the time of the different episodes, but you could also, they have clips, they have it's all interactive, and then to make it even better, you actually walk into the kitchen.
Oh, cool.
That's
And
amazing.
That was really cool.
It was just awesome. I was like taken away. I didn't expect that. I thought it was just going to be, stands and everything. It's like, because it's a traveling show, and they take the experience, and it's been up in New York, it's been out in San Francisco, and I think it's been down in Texas, but now it was up in North Carolina at Biltmore. And so I was just expecting just a little humdrum thing. When I turned the corner and I walked into the kitchen, I was blown away. You had the kitchen, you had where the dining room was, you had the family dining room, and then you also had the library. It was just just awesome. It was just such a neat experience. And what made it even more special is we were the last tour to be able to go through it before they closed for COVID and everything.
I think
And
they
back in
just reopened it.
Yes,
my
they
friend
did.
has tickets to see it now. So
Yep.
Yeah,
I've heard that. I think they just opened it late July, I think, was when it reopened. But it is just amazing if you get a chance.
Yeah,
if you want to be there.
My husband and I went to go see it last November. It was actually right before Thanksgiving, and everything that Mike says, I mean, it was an amazing experience. Just seeing all the costumes on display and just looking at the amount of work and detail that goes into every single piece it just blows your mind. The amount of detail that goes into everything. When you see it on screen, it's one thing. You see it in person and you're like, I can't believe they made all this stuff from scratch, even though I'm pretty sure some of it was actual vintage by the look of it. But it was just amazing. And when you walk onto those sets that they recreated, it just blows your mind.
It's just awesome. You know, I have a photographic memory. So literally as I was walking through, I was playing episodes in my head as we were doing it and everything. Oh, wait, that's where so-and-so did this. This is where that, and it was awesome. They went as far, they had Mrs. Padmore's office and they had, and it was just awesome.
Wow.
You were on the bottom floor of the house and it was just great.
Speaking of authenticity, have you guys all heard the story about the time they got the phone call about the medal? Do you know what I'm talking about?
no.
So they had a episode where they received military medals, and they got a phone call from a woman who said that they had put the wrong medal. It was a World War II medal instead of World War I medal. And the person asked, well, how do you know? And the woman on the phone said, I'm the one who pins the medals on. It was the Queen of England.
Oh, that is awesome.
She was watching and she called to correct that they had the wrong medal.
That's funny.
That's amazing.
I didn't see the Downton Abbey experience, but I did see before the movie came out, they had a costume exhibit in Chicago at one of the old houses. I don't remember what, but seeing the detail in the costumes, Rita, I totally agree with you. It was just amazing to see the amount of work they put into something that may only be shown once or twice.
That's why I would probably never cosplay Downton Abbey, because I like authenticity, and there's no way I'm going to be able to make those 100% accurate.
Yeah, no, it makes my hand hurt thinking of all the beating.
No.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I'm like, nope.
It's amazing. So thank you guys, all of you. I really appreciate your time here today. And I want to thank everyone that came out and watched us. You can find us at BritTrack on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Goodbye and have a great evening.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
And have a great virtual Dragon Con.
Yay, Dragon Con.